Okay, so last night my mom and I had a conversation about my father, and she was talking about how I don't know what the point of or what their conversation had been, but something she had said had pissed him off to the point he punched the refrigerator, and she was surprised that it hadn't dented the fridge. And I thought, well, okay. My thought was it's a matter of time before he starts turning that on one of us, right? And I've thought this before, um, that I could absolutely see him. I've especially thought about it for me because we really don't get along. And keeping in mind, a big part of why we don't get along is I've now set boundaries, and so he can't pull me into his chaos like he always used to do. And when my mom and I were talking last night, I said that it wasn't that he's changed because she kept talking about how much he's changed since he's had the strokes or whatever. It's like it's not that he's changed, it's just the bad behavior is amplified. But it's not really because of these strokes either, because when I started setting boundaries, actually even before I got to the point of setting boundaries, that was when he was throwing out things like calling me a dumb bitch because I said something that pissed him off. And I think the big thing there was he was pissed about something and went into his "oh woe is me" kind of bullshit that he's always done, literally my entire life, and mumbling about I remember exactly what it was. Something feeling sorry for himself, and I just said not interested, or not interested in the pity party or whatever. And he like got infuriated and like threw out the dumb bitch thing, and I'm not sure, I don't remember fully how that went. I just remember he said something, I responded, he got pissed at my response and followed it up with calling me a dumb bitch, and then continued spouting off, and then like went in another room or whatever. This was before I started setting the boundaries. Now, I've talked a lot on here about the thing with the boundaries is I didn't really realize that it was a thing that it was okay for me to do, or even a necessary thing to do, because that wasn't how my life taught me, right? That I was not conditioned that boundaries are okay. And it was literally the twin flame connection that started pushing me in the direction where I was getting the messages, whether it be from cards or from connections that I started going to the classes at Inner Path, and that was one thing Lenita said right away was needed to work on boundaries and shielding and protecting my energy. And once she said that and, started talking about the different ways to do that, I talked a lot about the rocks that I have for that purpose, and like one of the main ones has been my obsidian. Also, with family things, the red jasper. Red jasper is one, I didn't have this one, but this one is the one that I started carrying on me when my ex brought in the demonic doll that he got off of eBay. And while I didn't know whether I believed that was something that was actually possible, that this thing could be attached to this doll, it definitely changed the energy in the house. It wasn't maybe noticeable immediately, but I've talked about his energy, like he got more intense. I talked about the weird dream that basically creeped me out to the point that I looked to. We'd gone to New Orleans and gone to this shop that had all these little rocks, and I just found like a bunch of things that I was drawn to for whatever reason, so I got some. Well, then when I start having like this really the weird dream, okay, so you don't have to go scouring through the other stuff. Okay, I got woken up at like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning because I heard the Xbox in the other room start up. I thought his son that he had just gotten custody of. I think we just had the dog food delivery, so hold on. Okay, so we heard something. It was not the dog food yet. It's supposed to be a delivery today. I just heard a thud in the other room. And they went and checked, and I figured they were going to start belling. But anyway, so I heard the Xbox start up, and I thought his son that he had just gotten custody of was trying to sneak and get more time on the Xbox because that kid was obsessed with playing the Xbox. My former in-laws had gotten us cameras for the living room as a safety precaution because, the kid, his mom had forced him to lie about so much stuff for their family that it was a safety thing, right? So since we had cameras up, I figured that was a real easy way to check without getting up to have to go check. And when I turned the camera on and looked in there was nothing going on. I was like, okay, that's weird because I definitely heard that thing. And it was definitely loud enough to wake me up. The hound cow might start mooing again. Anyway, all I saw was the cat in there licking her belly. It was like, okay, so it definitely woke me up. I definitely heard something, right? And I nothing was going on, so I shut it off and went back to sleep. And a little bit later, I turned my head over, and I had my hand like this next to me on the pillow for some reason. And when I look over, I see this stupid doll with its little plasticky head in my hand. I can feel the cheap plastic of this Cabbage Patch Kid doll, and I felt it rotate in my hand, right? Startled me awake, and then I realized I had apparently dozed off. So I was like, the hell was that? That was fucking creepy as hell. I thought it was actually happening. I didn't realize I'd fallen asleep. But I think it was in that space of, that was me, sorry, of where you're almost asleep but not quite there. You're still vaguely aware of what's going on. And God, this dog and her belching at me. But anyway, it freaked me the fuck out. And honestly, it would have completely made sense if my ex had gone and gotten the doll to put there just to freak me out. But it ended up being I had dozed off. So, creeped me out. Of course, it's the stupid doll that he bought that was supposed to have some demonic entity attached to it that he just thought was a cool thing to have because we watched The Conjuring or something, so he was all into the Annabelle stuff and all that crap. So he didn't consult me before he bought the thing. He just decided to buy the thing and tell me later. So then it was this whole ordeal. But again, I didn't, I was going to seminary at the time, or had just gotten through seminary, and would have been after I graduated in 2016. And we got the kid in November 2018. 18. So yeah. So yeah, this is like the last few months that I was there. I think that actually came up January, or I want to say he got the doll in December. It was like right before we left to go back to Indy for the holidays. And I just left it on the porch. He ended up bringing it in, of course, because I wasn't going to touch it. It's like, I don't know what I feel about whether I think that something can be possessed or not, but I still don't like the idea of it. And, especially since I wasn't consulted ahead of time, it was just after the fact, which of course I would have said no. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, the red jasper. I had gotten a rock when we were at New Orleans, and that was the first thing I thought was, what do I have that might be able to help me in this situation? And I looked up something about warding off negative energies, and red jasper was something that fit the bill. So it's like, okay, so I started wearing like shorts to bed that had pockets so I could always have this red jasper on me when I went to sleep. I realized it was like there was this shift in the connection with my ex. Even it was like I was somehow removed from myself and could watch myself at another level and watch what he was doing, and I could see when he was saying or doing things specifically to get a reaction out of me. And I was like, well, okay, so I'm just not going to react, right? So I was able to start say, if you listen to especially Dr. Ramani, I know she talks about it a lot, the idea of gray rocking a narcissist, right? And that is basically, don't give them a reaction. So when I stopped giving him a reaction, and this was before I started following her content, because I actually read her book after I moved up here and was getting divorced. And yeah, anyway, that was something that I had already done, because I started wearing this, or having this thing that made me realize that, I could see things at a whole different level. And it's like, okay, well, so he wants a reaction, so I'm not going to give him a reaction. And that made him angry, right? So red jasper, I learned it's very effective in that. And that was kind of what made me realize that the crystals do work. So yeah. How'd I get there? Oh, the boundaries thing. So rocks, of course, and that's not even all. I have Mookaite is also for that, and the Shiva Lingam, and this obviously is not a rock, but it's the Eye of Horus, which is about protection and healing. So it's like, hey, maybe that'll help, right? So I got that as well. She also talked about the color black. So I usually have black somewhere as well. Used to wear a lot of it too. Didn't realize that was a means of helping to shield my energy until, after she talked about it. And then I've made all these other connections since. And of course the big one that I made was on the deal with color. I've talked about in 2020, I watched this Gem Goddess reading where she said, black dogs are important and mean it's about time. And of course, it's like, well, that's obviously for me because this is the only time in my life I've ever had black dogs, and I have 3 that are primarily black. So obviously that message was meant for me. That was 2020. 2024, when I started going to the classes at Inner Path, it was the first week of January. Lenita talks about color as a means of protecting your energy. So then it's like, oh, so then I'm thinking at this level of, at a time I couldn't protect my energy, I ended up with these dogs that were primarily black as a means of helping to protect my energy. Of course, Ziva, we got her after we got married, and like in 2013, it was about 4 months after we got married, I think. And she hated him from the get-go. And that we had another dog that we had for a little while, and that didn't work out. And the cat we had, there was a time when we first moved to Alabama where we had to leave the cat with his parents, so she wasn't tearing shit up when we were living in a hotel for a week and trying to find a place. So it's like, when we get a place, we'll bring the cat. Ziva went with us immediately, but then all her friends were in a whole nother state, and, her cat was in another state, and then, then we got, the dog was after we were down there and had moved into a house, or he had moved into the house anyway. That one was just a few months before we ended up having to take her back to the shelter. And honestly, my ex had no business having that kind of dog because it was a pit. And I like bully breeds a lot, but he is definitely not somebody that... I mean, he would try to bring out the bad in a dog, right? I've talked about when, when my 3 jumped to my aid, he started smacking at Ziva, trying to get her to bite him. So he could say that she was a problem and, now a bite risk, even though he had done something to me that had triggered her to start snapping. But like, just seeing him try to provoke her, it's like, yeah, he would have done that with anything. So, and the big thing on that end was realizing that we were at the point that he was either going to do something to me or do something to them to get to me, and use them. Like, if one of them bit him, then he would be calling animal control or whatever, right? And that would have been devastating for me. So when that thought came in of, they're doing their job to protect you, it is now your job to protect them, took that shit seriously, right? So, yeah. So anyway, color. Then I realized with Annie's class that, she said, somebody was asking, it was the next week, somebody was asking about colors and what she associated black with. And she said she associates black with source because everything comes from nothing, or from the void. It's like, so what you're telling me is that at a time that I was unable to protect myself, God brings in these dogs for me as a means of protecting me and helping me to shield my energy, because I didn't know it was something that I even needed to do, right? So then it's like just all these revelations that came up because of these things that I had pieced together. So January last year, 2024, it becomes very important. I realize the importance of setting boundaries and maintaining those, right? And I had a friend for a while. I mean, we're still... we talk like once every few months. Never actually met in person, but she lives in Georgia, so it's like not really convenient on that end anyway. But we used to talk all the time. And she had mentioned, after I got a reading from her at one point, that she said I needed to start saging myself. And I was like, well, I have birds, so I can't just like light anything up. And she said they make sprays, so you can do it that way. And it's like, well, hot damn. So I immediately got the sage spray. And that was something that I was doing fairly regularly. Now it is something that I do sometimes multiple times a day. But the point was the boundaries. So because I've started doing these things, like, even right now, my bag of rocks has shrunk immensely. And this one only has one in it. And the only reason it's still in there is because I like the skulls. And yeah, but that's why it only had one in it, just because they all fell out in the other bag. This is Shungite, I think. The only reason it was still in there was it hadn't come out when the other ones did. But my little bag is all grounding rocks. Will you stop helping? India heard me drop something. Now she got to come check me out. You know, but it's like right now, the only ones that I have in here are for like the grounding and energy protection stuff. Just because there were so many that I kind of got tired of having the extra bulk in my pocket. Okay, there's also blue onyx and green onyx to go with. There was green. Yeah, it's still green. Anyway, blue for throat chakra things, green for heart chakra things, so communicating from a more loving space sometimes. Hold on. Okay, anyway, had to tie my bag. Yeah, like the ones that I carry now, like I just wanted to downsize because that's a big ass pocket otherwise. Yeah. So it's like I'm trying to prioritize or shielding my energy as much as possible. It's like a freaking cobweb got knocked loose or something and was dangling past my hand. Anyway, since I actively go out of my way to do the energy protection stuff and, you know, keep my family disconnected and farther back, it's very, very useful. And, you know, I've realized through doing my little YouTube talk therapy thing that, you know, a lot of the issues that I was having that I've talked through on here was directly related to my father. And after I started setting my boundaries, okay, because the video that I did where I talked about him, it was the day he called me a dumb bitch. That was the November 17th, 2023 video where I had to repost it. Where I talked about that. That was before I knew anything about the importance of boundaries. Other than I kept having these cards that I would draw, like the animal apothecary deck. You know, I've talked about tigers being important, and like, you know, after I figured out the twin flame connection, then I went to the zoo that one day and it felt like he was there with me in this other space. It's like I was there with my mom, my aunt, and Gracie, but at this other level, it was like he was there with me. I was like, this is weird. And, you know, tigers were starting to come up as a important thing at that point in time. But that was the day that, you know, I got that amazing picture of the tigress that was staring at me like she had a message for me, right? And then I started pulling those cards, and of course, there's 2 tiger cards in that deck, and one of them is just has the tiger's face, and it's like up close and personal. It says, claim your power, and it talks about the masculine energy of taking action and all that fun stuff. The other one is from the feminine energy, and it talks about how tigress doesn't even entertain whether she should allow something toxic in her environment. She just goes out of her way to avoid those things, right? And to have solid boundaries so they can't affect her. You know, she's not going to allow toxic behaviors to come into her space and, you know, be an issue. So yeah. Anyway, I was just thinking about another piece on that I'll share one day, but not today. Anyway, that was the video when I first started doing the videos is like the week of or the next week of because I started my first video that I did was November 11th 2023, and it was November 17th, so that would have been 6 days, so within a week. That's annoying. Anyway, but yeah, like that was before the boundaries, so I go out of my way to set the boundaries with my dad now, right? Or with my family, period. But I've realized because of this whole thing that I've been doing, how much of the toxicity has come from my father. And, you know, I did a video the other day where I mentioned the coming across the Bible verse when I was in high school that talked about fathers should not exasperate or provoke your children. And I remember feeling that very much, being like it should have been directly spoken to him. And he made a big joke about it. And that's pretty much been the basis of our connection, is him trying to provoke me in some kind of way, right? So I keep getting these messages here recently, like this week, talking about being an agitator. It's from it's from the Sacred Rebel Oracle deck. I've gotten that message twice on like 2 different cards, and it's like, oh, I feel that a lot now, right? But even more so, as I'm having the boundaries and my family can't affect me, it's like they are still affected by my energy, right? And, you know, I've talked about how I was made to be the family scapegoat because, you know, I was the one that put my grandfather's illusion at risk, right? And his illusion of a big happy family, because I called out the bullshit, or was lined up to call out the bullshit anyway, because the things that didn't make sense, it's like, I don't understand why you're saying this, but then you're doing this, because those things aren't lined up together, right? You know, I talk about the big happy family, but everything in this family is proving to be miserable and nobody's happy, and people are just mean. So that's not a happy family. But since other people could buy into the illusion because, you know, the family was so involved in feeding the illusion and enabling his bad behavior, yeah, it was what it was. So the things, okay, so I've talked a lot on here about stories that have related directly back to my father, right? You can find just about, I think, not 100% of the videos that I've done, but you could probably click on any of the old ones, and at some level it's going, or at some point there's going to be a story about my dad and his bad behavior on there, or things he said or did to me that mainly said, and it goes to that provoking point. He might not have physically hit me or touched me inappropriately or anything like that, but he would still do the things to antagonize me as much as possible, right? And I've had this sense here lately. It's like, what if a good chunk of the suicidal ideation that I had in my life early on, if that wasn't even all mine? Because I know he's very much wound up in all that bullshit, and like he has no will to live. You know, I talked about last year when we went out for lunch on his birthday, he was in a real shitty mood, and when my brother was trying to get him to come around to say what was going on, he said, I just really thought I'd be dead by now. You know, I've talked a lot about how I feel like he's always resented his life, even though he still chose it. And I've talked about me and my brother have felt like, okay, with cars, if we complained that there was an issue with something, you get this very strong sense of he would be okay if the car blew up with you in it. And that solved two problems. Then he didn't have to worry about what was wrong with the car. Then he didn't have to worry about the kid being around to be a problem, right? It would have been gone, right? So I've talked about that a whole lot. But going back to this agitator point. Okay, so I've talked on here about like when I think my ex was watching something on TV at one point, and was it that? Okay, the thing I remember directly for what my ex was watching, there was a thing that talked about the legend of the Rainbow Warriors and talking about when the world's dying and, all this, or when the earth is dying and there's all this chaos in the world, then a group of people will rise up from all nations and they will be the Rainbow Warriors that are here specifically to try to heal it and to change things, right? I remember I just overheard this thing in passing and it just kind of locked in with, that's why I'm here. It's like, if I know nothing else, I know that resonated, and then it was like a very triggering point of, this is what I am here for. And I don't know if it was because I was looking up stuff like that or if it was another thing that he watched. I ended up coming across like this idea of the Hyoka empath. I think it's the Lakota tribe that talks about that one. But there again, it's like the idea of, okay, so there are these people that are basically mirrors for others, right? And that's always been, like, I've just always had this really strong sense that I know why people didn't like me, but people didn't like me. And now that I've like started having boundaries, I think a big part of what they don't like about me is that, well, going back to this agitator point, they see, okay, especially my father with not being able to pull me into his chaos any longer. Now he has to see his bad behavior and it's amplified back to him. I've talked a lot on here about how it feels like sometimes it's like all the shitty behavior from my father. It's like I just like I absorb it, and then at some point it just like it just like full force goes right back at him. And whether I do or say anything, that's not really the point. It's like a lot of times it's just presence. It's like if I have to take it on, it fires back at him at some kind of way. And he doesn't like that. So when I was talking to my mom last night, going back to this point, 3333 at the top, as I started reverting back, I was like, this isn't, nothing that he is doing now is new in any way. You just see it as he's had these strokes, so now you're attributing the bad behavior because he had this health thing that came up. It's like, but it's always been there. And I think a big part of why he's been such a miserable person to be around is because he's been so miserable in his own life, right? So, I've talked about him as a misogynist many times, because I know, and through this talking thing, that, okay, anytime I work on clearing space, physically, energetically, emotionally, all these things, clearing the junk, any way you do it, is an exhausting process, right? And so I've talked about how, I'll be cleaning and like really hitting the cleaning stuff hard for however long, and then I just get to a point where I cannot go any further. And as I have to step back and take a break, I've noticed that their stuff kind of starts creeping in, right? So it's like when I've cleaned up the living room, and yes, I still have stuff in there. They still have stuff in there, but is at least organized. You can, to some extent, you can sit in there and look out the window to watch the bird feeders if you want, or whatever. You can still do those things. I talked about my dog crates. They're out in case I need to put the dogs in them for some reason, but I know that my parents aren't going to go along with that situation because it's a step. It would be another step that they would have to do. They don't want to clear the table off. They also don't want to have to put the dogs up. So there again, we go back to the issue of having my two hellions, well, three hellions. Gidget doesn't get on the table, but Gidget will shop in the pantry. Taz can pull stuff off the counter and off the table. Ziva can only get on the table if a chair is left pushed out. My parents also do not push their chairs in. I know, she is 12, where she used to be able to get on the table just from the floor to the table. She can't do that now. She's not that graceful. Yeah, but it's like, okay, so the dog crates are up. So that's where I put my skate stuff when I go skate and get all sweaty and have to take the pads off and don't want to leave them in the bag to stink. I put them on the dog crate to dry. And then it's like my dad would go in there and throw his coat or his blanket on my skating stuff, because then I would have to move it, right? So it's like, since I won't clean up after him like I'm supposed to, according to his these energetic agreements, basically, in the family, the daughter's supposed to basically be some kind of servant to the older generations and take care of them when they start falling apart, and just do the things so they don't have to do the things anymore. And my father, told my brother that because he's the oldest, he is also supposed to be doing that, right? So my brother and his wife lived there briefly when they moved to Indy. And then, they bought a house, actually off a cousin, and then they bought this house, because the other one was eventually too small for what they needed, after they had a kid and all that fun stuff. But yeah, it's like, if you step back and just observe, he he puts his stuff on my stuff, so then I have to touch his stuff at very least. He started sitting at my spot at the kitchen table because he likes throwing his weight around and, being in that space, because yes, it's his house, and yes, it's his table and all this stuff, and I'm allowed to sit there, but damn it, I'm supposed to be cleaning up after him as far as he's concerned. So he leaves all this trash on the table, right? And that was part of what started the conversation last night, because there was... I mentioned the other day, he's he's diabetic. He's also on prednisone because he had to have brain surgery. And because of that, he is now on insulin because his sugar's been through the roof. And when they test his blood sugar, the test strip will frequently end up on the floor. And just leave it. Or the little alcohol pads to clean his finger before, he does the little thing. Just leave it. Table, floor, doesn't matter. Empty bottles, dirty dishes. Because at the end of the day, it's just he wants somebody else to clean up after him. So that is why he doesn't like me, is because I'm not doing that anymore. I've talked about when I come across his dirty dishes or whatever, and I have to deal with them for some reason, I put them on his desk. Since he can't take it to the table. Okay, the big one that we were having issues with for a while was the breakfast bowl trash, because he wants to give it to the dog. Well, he wanted to give him to his dog, but she's the one that died back in January. So at one point, there were 5 breakfast bowls on the floor. 4 were empty, and the other one had gotten flipped upside down and was just dirty, but she couldn't clean it out because it was upside down and stuck on the floor. And he never bothered to pick them up. So those I would put in front of him on the table. And then he would say shitty things to me about, we can't just put it in the trash. It's like, no, we can't, because you want to leave it on the floor for somebody else to pick it up. So now, if we put it in front of you, now you have to throw it away, right? So he doesn't like this logic. So this is one of those ways that I'm an agitator, right? So it's like, I'm not even necessarily doing anything that would necessarily be a problem if he was cleaning up after himself. But because he's not wanting to clean up after himself, he sees me as a problem, right? Yesterday, I came in the room long enough to fill my water cup, and he had some bullshit on his phone, and he loves the shit with bullying people and just listening to the penis in the office in the White House. He loves listening to any hate rhetoric that man is spouting, right? So he had something this guy is talking about, and he's throwing out the shit with all these lunatics. I said, spoken by the head lunatic himself. All I said. And he had a fit. He shuts it off. He said, why do you always have to say something when I'm trying to... He didn't even know, he didn't know, I don't know. He just got mad because I said something in response to the hateful shit he was watching. He did one of these with slamming his phone on the table. I am surprised it did not crack the screen, but the force he used to throw it at the table. I've thought many times it would not surprise me if he tried to hit me. With what my mom was talking about yesterday, it also wouldn't surprise me if he tried to hit her. And I was telling her, it's like, I feel like, I said, it's a matter of time. I think I am confident I am protected. And, if he were to try to do that anyway, he'd probably miss and punch the wall. But I feel that he wants to, right? I feel that very strongly, and I have for a while. And like I said, I go out of my way to not have to be around him. Because, okay, let's go back to the time where I was getting food together. I think I was making a baked potato. So, of course, that takes a while anyway because it was in the microwave. I was getting out the stuff that I was putting on it. I think we had Sloppy Joe stuff that I decided I was going to put on at that time with some cheese and all this stuff. So I'm getting the things together. So after the potato is mostly cooked, then I can add this other stuff on it and cook it the rest of the way. Get my utensils, my napkins, and my lemonade, whatever I wanted to have at that point. I don't know if that was a lemonade day, but fill my water cup or whatever. I was doing all these things, right? He had been watching something that was nature stuff on TV, right? Okay, I don't mind the I don't mind hearing about landmarks and things. That's okay. No problems. But as my food got done, and I was putting it at the end of the table, which normally would have been his spot, but like I said, he has shifted to sitting in my spot And it's completely a means of trying to make me have to clean up after him. So now I just don't sit in that spot, right? And that's the same with the couches. He sits in the spot that I was sitting in most often. When I changed to a different spot, then he started sitting in that one. And then when I shifted to the other chair because I was going to watch a movie with my mom that night, then when I forgot to put the blankets and everything back on the chair, he was sitting in that one next. And it's literally just to make me have to clean up after him. And I am not going to do it. It was bad enough the other day. He fucking peed on on the end chair on the kitchen table and left a puddle. I mean, it had absorbed with his pants to some degree, but there was still a part of a puddle there, right? So I was getting ready to sit in that chair. It's like, that one. I did end up wiping off, was infuriated, and mentioned it to my mom. And, of course, she's grossed out by it too, but then at the same time, yeah. I think the ridiculous thing is before she found out that he had the strokes, when she found out that he wasn't taking his meds, she said, "Do you think I'm really going to take care of you if you stop taking your meds and you have a stroke because you stopped doing what you're supposed to?" And then the next day, ends up having to take him to the ER because she thinks he's having a stroke. That too was something I still had to get pulled into the middle of because, first she's talking about driving him to the hospital. It's like, why would you do that if he's having a stroke when you could call the ambulance? It's literally not even a half mile down the road from our house. And they might actually know where to take him that could deal with that issue directly. So I ended up calling 911 and getting that whole thing done that way. But it's like, just the stupid little shit that comes up. It's like, he wants this stuff. He's always wanted. We're just supposed to fulfill the obligation of taking care of him because he fulfilled that obligation for his parents. And, my mom was fulfilling that obligation for her father, and, trying to take care of her mother. But then now her husband, who is, 11 years younger than her mother, is doing all his bullshit, right? So she would like to be concerned only with her mother, like she was with her father. But now my dad's doing all this bullshit too. So, I've talked a lot about my grandma and my dad both will be dying at some point in the next few weeks. I've talked about I would be surprised if my dad's still here at his birthday. His birthday is July 5th. Sometimes I question that, and it's like, maybe he'll be around a little bit longer. And then other times, like yesterday, it's like, I think there's a really good chance I might have called that one, and I mentioned it to my brother and I mentioned it to my mom. So if something does happen, they're probably going to try to say it's my fault somehow, or like my mom would. But all I'm doing is like not being in the middle of their chaos. It's like, I know that all you're going to do is try to provoke me and exasperate me as you've always done. That's literally the extent of our relationship has been him fucking provoking me as much as possible. And when my mom gets mad at me, then he really enjoys, going back for the digs, right? And my brother doesn't realize how much our father has played into that as well. But it's like, he will comment every single time, like we piss my mom off about something. It's like, she will say the thing to my dad, and then he, will inevitably get a text message from him. Okay, like the bullshit with Christmas. My mom trying to rally around and act like she wants to be the superhero grandma for Gracie when she kind of was acting like she forgot Gracie existed because her daddy was in the hospital and she was living at the hospital with her daddy because he needed her life force energy. So she was there all the time to make sure he had it. Right? So, yeah. So then when daddy dies and suddenly she comes in all big and puffed up with I know we want to protect Gracie from the hard stuff that's happened this year, but I really think we need to do what we can to make this the best Christmas, blah, 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 and all this stuff. And nobody's buying it, right? And then, I don't remember if it was that specifically. There was something that nobody responded to. Oh, there was a back and forth in that conversation between my mom and my sister-in-law for a little bit, and then my mom trying to shift into playing the victim mode, and she was completely missing the stuff that my sister-in-law was saying about what was actually going on with the kid. And my brother and I just we kind of just send each other like little emojis and whatnot to have like these little like quiet conversation. There's a keyboard over there. I was just trying to check to see what my phone's at. It's at 18%. I had to bring my phone charger because I wasn't sure I'd have enough battery for this. But 18%, so we're still good for now. And apparently there's thunder. And I guess depending on what's going on with that, I need to keep an eye out because my Gidget is terrified of storms, although my mom should be there and she usually just kind of hides with my mom if I'm not there. Mom's the backup. Anyway, scared Buttercup. She's all at once started jingling. She's still asleep though. Or she's back asleep, I think. Anyway, there was some back and forth in that conversation, and my mom was like completely missing the point. And then I don't remember what she ended up saying, but it got ignored. And then like my dad comes in later with just an unbelievable. And it's just to emphasize the fact that mom was doing or saying something and we were supposed to have some kind of reaction and we weren't doing our part. So that's when he comes in to chime in with stuff, right? So, I mean, we might not... Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, she was talking about all that stuff, and I said, is he still on his psych meds? And she said, yes, because she's in charge of his meds right now. Because he obviously can't handle it, and he keeps taking himself off of things. So, the psych meds were on there, so she started going through his meds to see what psych meds he was on, and she's like, well, he needs to be on more of something because it's obviously not working. So she sent a message to the doctor, or that's what she was going to do, to try to get that increase, because she thought there were like 2 or 3 that he was on, and apparently he's only been on 1 since he's been back from the hospital and the rehab place, right? And oh my god, the whole experience at the hospital, like, I don't know. He was being a dick at the hospital. Now, of course, a lot of people will try to tell you that he was just being a dick because, he had this thing that happened and he was having to stay there. It's like, no, this is literally how he's always been. It's just now other people are getting to experience it because I'm not absorbing it from him. I've talked about that transmuting thing where I absorb the density from the environment around me as a means to find something to do with it so I can clear it from my system and, from the environment in general. And now that I'm not allowing myself to be affected by his, I'm a lot happier for one thing. But granted, there's been a lot of healing that's gone into this whole process. But yeah, like, since he can't touch my energy, he hates me. Yes. I have no problem saying that at all. And my mom said something last night. You two are just like or oil and water. I was like, it's exactly because of this. It's like he only wants to put negativity out into the world. And before, I was doing my part and I was being affected by it, right? And I took it in to my own system and then I had to deal with it. Now I'm realizing most of what I was taking on wasn't even mine. So since I realized that and I started setting boundaries, and I started healing the stuff that was mine to heal, it's like there's a whole lot of people that don't want anything to do with me, and I appreciate that. I've talked about like oh my god, the time on the dating app where it was like the universe was just trying to show, if you want to see what's out here, let me show you the worst of the worst, because this is not where you're going to find your person. Right? So one of those experiences was the the profile of the guy that's going on and on about how if you have or have ever had green hair, do not even bother, because I'm looking for somebody I can take to church. And I was just like, oh, it's the green that's the special one then, is it? So I like almost always have green since then. And it's going back to this agitator point. I call it douche deterrent, right? Because I can... Okay, what I said then was, I know if you are somebody that is going to judge somebody harshly for their hair color, we're not going to get along anyway. Because I like color. I like a lot of color, obviously. And this is my today's outfit. But yeah, it was like, okay, thank you for telling me how I can actively have you not come closer, right? So thank you for giving me this possibility of a thing I can do to keep douchebags like you from trying to think they should have some kind of access to my energy, right? I talked about, I found my hospital chaplaincy internship badge back in the fall, and I sent a picture of it to my cousin, and it was just so ridiculous. And she just sent me a message saying, "You look very vanilla." I was like, yes. It was like I had like this reddish brown hair, this huge bulky ass sweater, which I like the color. I used to like the sweater, but it was like it's just like looking at the outfit and it's like remembering the kind of clothes and everything that I had back then. It's like it was all just trying to fit a world I wasn't made to fit in. And I actually, okay, like the more I learn about like astrology and numerology and all of these things, the more I love them. Yesterday, I started looking, I had this thing pop up on YouTube. I know her name's Carmen, and she does a lot of stuff with numerology, but I forget what the thing was. So I will tag her in the video description. But it was talking about life, love events, like in how you can know at what ages you will have these certain things in your life based on numerology. And she's talking about pinnacles, right? And I don't really understand what they are. I'm going to say that right here. What I'm going to say is, when I looked up, okay, now I'm at 15%. Maybe I'll give it till 10. When I looked up the pinnacles and was trying to see if there was an easy way to figure it out for myself, or how I could just go straight to the thing where I could figure out what these pinnacles were, one thing came up and it had to do with life path number as well. And I think, I don't remember. Anyway, the first pinnacle that it came up for a life path one, which is what I am, was from 0 to 35 years. Okay, so in thinking about that for me, it's like everything leading up till Tyler's death. Tyler's death, when I was 35, has been one of these huge things that started me on my healing process and like really being able to understand and clear things from my system. But it all stemmed from, and it was then too, I had this knowing, back in high school, talked about it a lot, that I knew. It was the last week of high school. I was standing in the driveway with the first boyfriend that I had. And, like, we've been together. We were together for like 4 years altogether. But we had been doing this Jabez prayer thing through church. And I just remember praying for these lofty things. And I just all at once had these knowings that kind of popped in. And the first was that our group was going to go our separate ways, and then it would be Tyler's death in our mid-30s that would bring everybody back together for a time. The next one was that I would be 40 before I started to understand what was going on for myself and, being able to do anything with my life for that matter. And the other one was I saw this group of 5 guys that I didn't know any of the information really, but it's like I always just knew that we were here to change the world together. And of course, I've talked about that one linking back to this band that the Twin Flame is in, like basically the specific group of 5 that activated me into my process. Of course, that would not have happened without the Twin Flame piece in there as well. But anyway, going back to this other stuff. So yesterday I find out that there's this is a numerology thing as well. And there's these pinnacles. And for my life path 1, the first pinnacle for my life is 0 to 35 years. 35 is when Tyler died, right? He was 34. I had just turned 35. It was 10 days after my 35th birthday that he died. And leading up to that, I started writing to him beforehand, but it was really his death that really kicked it up because it was whatever's on the other side of death. I figured he already knew anything that I would have otherwise tried to mute down or diminish in myself. I've talked about the times I wanted to reach out to him along the way, and then I couldn't bring myself to do it because I just was afraid that I thought he was living his dream, and I thought that for me to reach out, it would put him at risk for having my sadness ooze into his life, basically. So I wouldn't do it because I didn't want to be the thing that brought more sadness into his life. I see now that that was a misguided way of thinking about it, and maybe if I had reached out to him, we would have been able to reconnect in a way that different decisions would have been made, and maybe he wouldn't have died. But at the end of the day, he did. And that was a necessary part of my process too, because of his death, I started writing to him, not editing myself regarding what I would have denied or tried to hide otherwise, like the stuff with my cousin, the stuff that my family had poured all this shame and guilt on me to try to keep me in line. It's like when he was dead, then it was like, when Tyler was dead, then it was like, he already knows anything that I would have tried to hide anyway. So I just started, talking about everything. And that was what cleared enough space that I could go back to the Alabama house with my ex later that year. Tyler died July 19th, 2018. I had moved back up to Indiana December 2017, and it was a trial run on figuring out what I had to do to really commit to getting out of the toxic marriage, right? So, and I didn't realize that when I left the first time, but then when he's trying to beg me to leave certain things behind and all that stuff and stuff that was important to me. Like I had this freaking gecko thing on the wall that somebody had given me, and he was making a big deal about I needed to leave that. And it's like, well, I'm already aware that he's been unpacking things from my boxes that I had packed up in the front room. So I learned because he stole stuff out of my boxes and hid them around the house that to leave for real, I was going to have to get a storage unit, right? So, also, my mom, that first time around, she and my dad had to go pick me up, and help me move my stuff back. But she wouldn't let me bring Gidget and Taz, so she made me leave them behind. It's like, those are my dogs. It's like, that right there was the single thing that completely sealed the deal that I wasn't gone for good. And so when I left in December and had to leave 2 of the dogs behind, and that was traumatic in and of itself, but then also had all the stuff that he was trying to unravel for me when I was trying to get my shit together so I could leave. Yeah, let me see where I'm at. I'm at 13%, so I'm going to go ahead and get my cord. Okay, so anyway. So, when I read that about the pinnacles and that like the first, it's like years 0 through 35 for me, it's like a single chunk. It's like basically everything leading up to me starting the healing process. It said the second pinnacle is supposed to be for me, from 35 to 44. So it's like, is this just like the focused healing time or something before we can get to the good stuff? Anyway, I like fizzled out on trying to go too far with that. It's like there's so many things that I'm trying to make sense of. And I don't know, just realizing that like there's so much accuracy to like the things that the church demonizes because the church doesn't want you to know that you can know things. And oh man. That's the biggest thing with astrology is like when I realized that okay, my Uranus is square my Venus in Leo, which has something to do, okay, my Venus in Leo has something to do with me being all bright and colorful and kind of, that's the showy thing. I talked about many times that I used to, the way I dress now is how I wanted to dress back then, like in high school. But I talked myself out of it because I was afraid of standing out too much. Now I kind of am thinking it's like, who would I have been if I wasn't trying to blend in and not stand out? Because like my entire life I spent trying to fit other people's standards and ideals, and now I'm like, who would I be now if I would have done these things differently back then? But even then, like, okay, going back to the piece where the agitator piece, I was trying like as much as I possibly could. I was trying to be good and not make waves, but that in and of itself is contrary to everything that I am if I'm here to be an agitator, and I'm pretty confident that I am. Especially the messages that I've gotten, but then the Uranus square my Venus in Leo, but then also just my Venus in Leo, period. It's like just all these little things. It's like I wasn't supposed to ever blend in. And I tried hard to blend in to make other people happy, and it didn't work. it just made me feel like I was somehow responsible for their misery. But it's like, if somebody's just a miserable person, you can't take their shit on you to try to heal it for them, right? I've talked about that a lot with like my she might have to go outside. She's like chasing her ass. um, do you need to go potty? You want to go outside? Yep, I think that's what we're doing. Hold on. Okay, so sometimes I think these little intermissions are helpful for bringing my thoughts back together, and sometimes I don't. I'm not sure. Anyway, basically, I want to figure out more about the things now. And now, I had this thing pop up the other day. It was one of those like reading your palm things, and it's like, what does your palm say about you? And I've been trying to figure out like the life path number and the heart numbers and all these things and which line's which and all this stuff. So I was like, okay, so maybe this will help me figure that out. And it didn't take the picture right, but it did show me like what certain lines of my hand are connected to. Like it said, the headline was shorter than it actually is, now that I know which one it is, or have the idea of that. But I still don't know what any of those things mean. It was like part of what it was talking about sounded like it made sense. And then there's this other thing. I got a palmistry book from Half Price Books the last time I was there. And then I started looking through that after I did this thing, I was trying to figure out these lines and what these mean. And, then I was reading that there's this line that goes almost vertically through the middle of my hand. Like, okay, no, I don't, can you see it? I don't. It's like right this one. Not the bendy one, but that one. That crease. Apparently that's not there in your early years. And that comes later. But then it's like, I don't remember what it had to do with. But then I was like, just thinking about like all these different layers too. Like that even, it's like, now I want to like go find somebody that knows how to do these things and like find more information about it, because the little bit, like the heart line it was talking about, the stuff it said for that kind of made sense. But when I was looking through the book, trying to make sense of the things from this little app that I decided to check out briefly, because I'm finding the other stuff is legit, like the numerology and the astrology stuff. I have this Horos app where, since I don't pay for that one, I just have the free version. It has very basic stuff, although there's more to it. I mainly keep it so I have a quick reference if I come across something that's talking about like finding what the ruler of this house is or whatever, so if I keep it there for like quick reference stuff, but then I have the pattern, and that one brings up like cycles for my life, and it's like, ooh, these are like always legit. And apparently, based on my birth time and all this information, it's like, it was talking about, how before 40 to 41, which there again is that goes back to that time frame. I realized, that knowing that I had my senior year in high school, where it's like I would be 40 before I started to figure anything out. And then 40, when I hit 40, was when I started setting intentions, which brought in all this other information that I started to learn about. And it's like, oh, wow. But then like the pattern app talking about just the pattern for my life is I merge with my environment basically so completely that it takes until I'm 40 to 41 to start really getting to know myself. Right. And then figuring out who I am in the world, how to protect my energy, and now how I can deal with this and these other things going forward. Right. So it's like all these things are like converging into like this bigger picture and making perfect sense with, you know, these little things that I've known about for my life, but then didn't know anything about. Like, I had these random knowings, right? And then I ended up seeing my friend die in our mid-30s, and well, I wasn't there to see it, but I was at his funeral and all that stuff. And, you know, there was a chain to keep everybody informed with what was going on. And then, you know, eventually when he passed away, the one before he passed away, he said that he wanted to really work to try to stay around. And then the next update was that he hadn't made it, and it was like, but I think like part of that too, I feel like there was a bunch of us in that group that had him on a pedestal. I don't know if others had him on the pedestal to the point that I did, where I thought it would bring him down if I reached out to connect to him. You know, so I don't know if there were other people that actively avoided reaching out to him whenever he would have needed somebody to potentially check in with him just to make sure everything's okay, right? So at the end of the day, check on your friends. You know, if you have that thought of, I wonder how so-and-so's doing, or maybe I should check in with them, follow it. You know, I've talked about the guy I used to work with at the factory, the first factory. His name was Tim, and he was like I forget what his title was, but he was one that helped to train me into this PG role, which is like associates, but then like the people that don't get any more glory for doing more work, but you just have different work to do, and you're not in the trucks loading stuff with everybody else. You're kind of overseeing that and helping, you know, jumping on different trucks to help speed up the process as needed, you know, that kind of thing. You know, I was doing that, and then he was like the next step up, where he was still in, he was in the orange vest. I don't remember which ones the orange were. One of them was supervisor, one of them was manager, but I think it was I think it was a manager maybe. And then the supervisor was over that. I'm not going to swear to it. Anyway, he kept trying to get the red role and kept getting screwed over, and people hired around him. People who were doing less work than he was were getting hired over him because he was so good in his job, they didn't want to take him from that spot. Meanwhile, this other guy that nobody liked and nobody really liked to work for that much got promoted over him because nobody really wanted to spend time with him. So clearly, let's go give him a position where he gets more money and all this stuff, but isn't directly with the people, right? Everybody liked the other guy more. Anyway, I got the sense, I left that job in October 2020. And like 3 weeks later, I got this really strong sense. It's like, I should check in with Tim and see how he's doing. So I checked in with him on Tuesday, right? And we had this good conversation. And he was still having issues with the company and trying to get promoted, and them kind of pissing around on him and not wanting it to happen. And they were telling him he needed this, this, and this to be able to get promoted. And then he was demonstrating how he already had all those things, and they were just, you know, taking advantage of him basically. And they're like, oh, well, we didn't realize you had all these things and blah, blah, blah. So he said he was sounding optimistic that he thought they were actually working on it. So he might actually get promoted in the next, or something like at the come New Year. So 2021 ish for that. He was looking forward to that. I checked on him on a Tuesday in November, and Friday he had a massive heart attack and died. And it's like, yeah, you get the sense you should check on somebody, check on them. My brother said he had that sense with a good friend of his from the Air Force, and then he didn't do it, and then the guy ended up committing suicide, right? So it's like, and that's one of those things, it's like he can't go back and do anything to change that now. And maybe it wouldn't have changed anything then, but maybe it would have helped the guy think maybe he's not alone for the situation that he was going through. I don't know. You don't know why you feel led. It could just be an answer to somebody's prayer. Maybe somebody is feeling like they need something, and somebody happens to send them a message to see what they're doing or how they're doing at that point in time, and maybe that message was what they needed, right? So if you get the sense, do it. Anyway, so going back to the junk with my father, the conversation last night, my mom just kept going around with, I just don't know what we're going to do with him. It's like, well, if he's getting more violent, he might end up having to go somewhere else because, and these aren't new things, right? Him slamming things around. He punched a hole in the wall with a phone when there was a phone that we had on the wall, and it had a cord. And he slammed the phone like that against the wall and busted a hole in the wall. And then later, he punched another hole in the wall at some point. Now, my mom used that to make a big deal about me and my brother and having our father's temper, because at one point I kicked a hole in the wall, and at one point my brother kicked a hole in the cabinet. So she loved that piece because she could use that to remind us how much we were like him, and had this anger problem or whatever. It's like all the different ways people find to control you, but all the different ways people demonstrate who they are throughout time anyway. Like, all the stuff I've talked about with my dad in this video. It's not new stuff. It's just, he has no access to my energy now, and I avoid him as much as possible. So when he's trying to put this negativity out there and try to get it out of his system and burden me with it, I'm not picking it up, right? So now he's faced to see it amplified back to him because I'm not being affected by it, right? And yeah. My mom talked about last night, she said she talked to my uncle, and he is going to take the guns that are in the house currently, because as soon as she gets them all together, because it's making her nervous at him, or at having those around him with the way he is. It's like, I already said in this video that it would not surprise me if he tried to swing at me at some point. I've felt that for a while. And then the way she was talking to him yesterday, it's like, it wouldn't surprise me for that matter if he tried to do that to her. And now, of course, we got the excuse for him that he's had these strokes. So it's this thing that now is a potential concern. But it's like, if he had to deal with his own energy sooner, this always would have been a concern. Because I was, basically absorbing it, so he was less affected by it. Yeah, he had a lot better stuff in his system. He didn't have to worry about it back then. Now, since he doesn't have me to absorb it anymore, he's just having to deal with this shit. And sorry about you. But now I'm also realizing a lot of what I carried wasn't even mine. So the hell, man. I didn't know this was like a magic trick that I needed to worry about. But now that I do, and now that I know how to protect myself better for it, here we are. Yeah. I think I have a pick on my pants, because there's this little, right there. Yeah, that bothers me now. Brand new pants. I think I snagged it on something the other day. Anyway. Try not to mess with it. So I'm pushing an hour and a half. Is there anything else I want to talk about in this video? Oh, that was so there's the deal with the him wanting to listen to the hate rhetoric on his phone. See, mind you, because he's not being able to affect me, now he's also ingesting more of this like gross content, literally hate rhetoric, and he just has nowhere to go with it except for become more hateful, right? So it's not new, it's just amplified, right? So yesterday my mom calls me and says something about they got a few groceries and she picked up dinner, and could I help them unload the car, right? No big deal. I don't have, like I said, I don't have a problem helping out around there. It's just there's a lot of stuff that they have like through time made me feel as completely on me to do that I have a problem with. Because I was just supposed to clean up after them and just, they didn't have to do anything with it after a certain point because it fell on me. But since I started pushing back and having boundaries, and like the deal with the cleaning thing that one day when my mom said that my aunt and uncle were coming over, and then I cleaned the whole living room. And the night before they came at midnight, she was vacuuming out the lint trap on the dryer and did not do a damn thing in the kitchen or the family room to make it look like she knew company was coming. So when my aunt and uncle were coming over here to my brother's house, because I think they had a couple pieces of furniture that they were buying off of them, since my brother's family's working on moving. They were just been selling a lot of the big stuff just so they don't have to worry about moving it. They get new when they get over there, whatever. So my aunt and uncle were going to come over to our house for dinner, but they were starting over here, which my parents told them that they would come over here and meet them, but they didn't tell my brother and sister-in-law. So really all they were doing on that end was because they wanted to see what all they were getting rid of, right? So, yeah. So they could just trash talk all that. Well, on the process of them coming over here, we had picked Gracie up from school, so Gracie was with them. And I had done a video that day, so it ended up giving me time to watch the video, so then I could, or while I was uploading it onto my computer, and so I could get everything wrapped up with that. So I did. My mom heard me say that I wasn't going to come over here with them, and she thought that meant that I was going to stay home and clean. I did not. Because she did not participate in that at all. And she knew that I cleaned the living room. But then I made a smart ass remark when they got here. Okay, first off, they take them in through the garage that is like a hot mess in and of itself. And then into the kitchen, which, I don't go in there very much anymore because their stuff is like consuming the table. Like it looks like my mom her stuff has swallowed the table, basically. And you could barely sit there in a couple spots, right? Stuff has to be moved if anybody's going to sit there. So mom thought I was staying home to clean up. No, I already cleaned. I cleaned the room that my stuff was in, right? My stuff wasn't in the other room, so I wasn't worried about that one. That was her stuff. She didn't do it. And then she expected me to do it, and I didn't do it. But then as she's running around trying to just throw everything from the table into a box that inevitably gets put into the garage and buried in the other stuff, I think we probably have like 3 or 4 boxes out there of stuff that came off of the kitchen table at some point in time and just needs to be gone through. But somebody came over, so it ended up in a box and then ended up out in the garage instead. Yeah, so she was running around throwing stuff on the table, and I just made a smart-ass remark about it. This is a shame we did not know company was coming sooner. Like yesterday when you told me. I didn't say that part, but I did say it's a shame we didn't know anybody was coming over thing. And my aunt laughed. And my mom's running around. She just gave me a dirty look. As soon as I went in the other room, I hear her tell my aunt that I don't do anything unless she tells me to do it. It's like, excuse me? No, I clean up the living room periodically just because my stuff is in there and because like the dog hair that's floating around is generally it's pretty safe to assume that it's possibly from Gidget or Taz because they shed pretty intensely and don't get brushed enough. I'll admit to this. And when I see the random dog hair tumbleweeds floating through, first off, we got this IVAC thing that's fucking amazing. You just broom it over and it sucks it right up. So I love that thing. But anyway, we got 2 of those. I saw it, the place I was getting my hair done at one point, they had one of those and I was like, what is that? We need one of these, So I mentioned it to my mom and then she ordered it. And so like, because it's easier than like using the damn dustpan, I prefer that now. So a lot of the cleaning that I've done in there has been, I saw, the tufts of hair and then it got me started on the thing. And then, I ended up sweeping and mopping the whole floor because it needed to happen, right? So that's the room I'll do that in because that's the room that has a lot of my stuff in it. But then I stopped going in the kitchen very much because my mom's stuff takes over the table. And then my dad's trash takes over the table. And that's a problem because I'm not cleaning it up for them. But I'm not there to be your fucking servant. So it's like I will help you if you're actually doing something to participate otherwise. But if it's just my job because I'm there, no. I will still do the things. Anyway, short story long. So she called me about that. I was like, okay, fine. So I helped carry in the groceries, and then we ate. And then, what was it? I sat down and I think I like opened the box of food that wasn't at my spot and I don't even know what I said. Okay, let's see if I can come up with it. But it immediately, my dad came back with, see? And I knew it was he had been talking about me to my mom, because they do often. And he always wants to spout off about how I never have a kind thing to say about him. That's because he never has a kind thing to say, period, right? And I've talked about him calling me a dumb bitch, right? Talked about it a few times here today, right? But it's like, he always wants to see that I'm not nice, but he never wants to pay attention to the bullshit that he does that might bring out that kind of stuff, right? So yeah. Anyway, so last night we're having this conversation and she's realizing that he's not on as many psych meds as he probably should be. So she's going to talk to the doctor and then, we have the mention of if he just keeps getting worse, he might need to go somewhere else. Mind you, she also was the one that said, when we found out that he hadn't been taking his meds, that did he think she was going to take care of him if he had a stroke because he stopped taking his meds and stopped doing anything to take care of himself. So when the next day rolls around and he's, in the hospital for strokes, and then it's turned out he's had multiple strokes. Of course, we found out that it's like Wednesday was the brain surgery thing. Thursday night, it was like 1:00 in the morning, Friday morning. So that whole thing was irritating too. I got to sleep for 5 minutes. And then I get a message from my mom saying that she thinks my dad's having a stroke and all this crap. It's like, so then it starts this whole ordeal. So it was Wednesday that thing happened and that she said the thing. And then the next day, the next night, he's having the strokes or whatever. And we don't really know when that came up. And honestly, I feel pretty confident that he's triggered most of that himself anyway. Okay, first being he's got the multiple health conditions where those type of strokes are common anyway. Secondly, he's taken himself off of his medications multiple times, and those can have side effects, right? If you just abruptly stop taking your meds, that can cause problems. Then also, he ends up with this the eye thing, and then having to have the brain surgery, which was to take like a piece of his artery out to test for this other thing, which came back inconclusive, but everybody's pretty confident that he does have. But the brain surgery is another thing that can potentially cause strokes. They didn't tell us that part, that was something that was entirely possible, but it's like there's all these things right there, and it's like, plus his negativity and his wanting for everybody to just take care of him and, clean up after him rather than doing anything either. Okay, my grandmother's house was disgusting. And it always smelled like pee, and she would just she'd have a couple trash bags full of dirty Depends in the bathtub. Stuff like that. It's like her house always stunk. I've talked a lot about how that house stinks a lot because he's doing the same shit. It's like my mom always complained about that stuff every time we were out there. And it's like, I've been saying for a while, it's like he's turned into his mother. It's like he doesn't give a shit. Somebody else is supposed to deal with it, right? We're supposed to be obligated to just cleaning up after him. So he's not trying to do anything to make that easier. He's the man that has long left the freaking apple cores on the end table and the dirty dishes, so somebody else has to deal with it. It's just, I stopped dealing with it. I stopped going into those rooms because I was having to clean up messes that weren't mine. So it's like, okay, well, so to stop this, I'm going to stop going in those rooms, right? But then that also, going back to my practice round on leaving. So I had the practice round for leaving my ex before I was able to lock it into place with the ex for the real time, where I was able to disconnect completely, and then using that to help disconnect this time from my family. Now that I realize my family is largely why I've had so many issues on some of these things. Yeah. But when my mom was talking about it last night and talking about that stuff, talking about my giving the guns to my uncle for safekeeping, all that stuff, it's like, I told her then too, it's like, okay, it's like I've said I could see him hitting me for a while, I've talked about that, and I said, when she mentioned the guns, it's like, shit, it wouldn't surprise me if he tried that either. Really? Right? So, and she said, so she's concerned enough about it that she's getting them out of the house. I don't know how soon that's going to be, like how quickly she's going to move about getting that handled. But still. So, yeah, anyway. Family's a hot fucking mess. And I'm an agitator. Okay, so, there again. When I said something after dinner, when my dad had left the room and gone back to her bathroom, I think, I was in there for something, and I had said something, and she's like, well, you don't have to say anything about it. It's like, I don't come into this room very often because of this stuff, right? Because there's always the mess and always the things. And she's like, well, you just don't have to do anything. It's like, I actively try to avoid him as much as possible. I try to not communicate to him as much as possible. This isn't a new thing. This is when I was realizing that I needed to set boundaries and started setting boundaries. He's the one that's been negatively affected by my having boundaries. She's another one. So yeah, they have more problems with me because they can't affect me like they used to, right? Because I'm not just absorbing their stuff. Now they're having to look at it as all this garbage in the environment and wanting to put it on me, but all it is I'm not letting their shit affect me. right? So now, when something happens to my father and my grandmother, I can confidently say my mother will fully turn her um, disdain in my direction. Right now she's got other shit to worry about. um, I made a comment last night. It's like, look, I am working on finding my way out of this situation. And I just left it at that. And she said, well, I don't think moving out is the answer to the problem or whatever. It's like, I feel like it is. I just feel like it's going to be a whole lot of disconnecting on a whole lot of levels. And, dude, this just wiped its butt on the wall and turned around and sniffed the wall. It's so gross, dude. Oh, man. Anyway, I keep having these ads for like these camper vans pop up. I've talked about camper vans on here a few times and how I've thought about like, maybe me and my dogs need to have a situation where we find a camper van and travel for a while until we figure things out, right? Stop. And then I had like, there's a bunch of them that it's been like, a sweepstakes thing to potentially win something, but I keep having these things come up, and now it's like I feel like the universe is wanting me to look more in that direction. And I did go ahead and sign up. There was one of them I signed up for the free version. One of them I accidentally paid for, but that's all right. I feel like I'm supposed to be focusing more attention on possibilities that way, right? And like a big part of what, I wasn't able to have dreams for myself before when I didn't have the boundaries. And then as I've talked about like the twin flame stuff a lot. It's like as I started trying to, so like there's this end goal kind of idea for a while on that end. And I was thinking about this person and possible connection, right? As I was able to keep that as an ideal, other things started coming across my path, and it's like I would have things where I would consider, okay, what would I do? What would I want in my potential living situation? Like when I was first like seeing things, dreaming about things, having visions, it's like everything was like white walls. It's like I like color too much to have just white walls. Not that I have a problem with other people who are okay with having white walls. It's just I can't have it in my space because I like color too much. But then like the series of things that led to me painting my room the way it is now with, all the chaos colors and everything, and then just the things that have come up. It's like when I pose this thought of what would I do, then the universe lines me up with situations where I, start playing with things. Like, okay, the whole reason I painted my room at all was because I had this idea that I wanted to move the DVD cabinet to another wall, and then realized my dad had like put just 16 holes in the wall trying to figure out where the stud was to hang this thing up. Right? But when I had like a bunch of bird cages and like other shit in there and didn't have the space, and that was the only space that I could put it, but then I started moving stuff out, and then it's like, okay, well, it would be better over in this other spot, right? So he did help me with that, so there was a good thing that he did. But then I was like, crap, now I have all these, this series of holes in the wall, and what do I do with that, right? So then what I thought, it's like, okay, so I'll just patch the holes, and we always hang on to leftover paint in case something needs patched, so I'll just do that. Come to find out, we didn't have any more of that color. It's like, shit. What I did have was like 12 quarts of rainbow paints that had been used. Well, they weren't all for Gracie's wall. Gracie had, let's see, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. So there's 6, but also pink and aqua. So there's 8. And then I had a couple because I just like shopping in clearance paint, and it's like, ooh, I could have a project for this. I could come up with something. And there was also some leftover blue from what they had done their walls in the old house before they moved too. So there was some of that, and there were a couple others from that. But anyway, I got a lot of free paint off of them. They were just going to leave it behind for the house. It's like, well, they're going to throw it out anyway, so I'll take it. So then it ended up being this thing where, okay, now I have holes in the wall. I don't have any more of the indigo that I had on the wall, but I have a whole lot of other colors. So maybe I just have like an accent wall where it's colorful. And so that's what I was going for. But then it ended up being the whole space, right? And it's like, oh, this is what I would do if I could do anything, right? And it's like, oh, okay, this makes sense. But even seeing that if I don't skate the irritation stuff out of my system beforehand, then the paint on the walls looks more chaotic. That's how I figured out part of how I figured out that I just absorb things and then I have to figure out what to do with it. So when I started skating obsessively, then that was one means of dealing with it. And that was one means of starting to help myself with setting boundaries with my family, because then, I go spend time with them and then I go skate it out of my system because I realize how really toxic and icky it is, right? And then, as I was doing those things more and more, then I realized that I'm affected by just a little bit of time with any of them and the negativity. So then I, stopped going around my grandma's house at all. I talked about how August last year I realized that in the 33 years that I'd been brought up to obsess over my grandfather's death, he still hadn't died. It's like at that point, it's like the stuff that was going on with him, he should have died by that point. But then, that was after I'd set boundaries for like 8 months, right? So I started setting boundaries at the beginning of January, and then, it was a matter of figuring out what was working and what wasn't working. And then come August, it was noticeable immediately to me when they weren't having access to my energy. Like their response to me was like pretty noticeable. But especially like everybody just got more negative and mean. And like health-wise started going downhill. So then when August rolls around and my grandfather won't use his cane, which is going to be something that right there will be something that happens for my father, because he won't use his cane either. Yesterday, I found it hanging on the back of a chair. The other day, it was hanging on the freaking ice thing on the door. The little, okay, you put your cup in there to get ice or water in it. It was hanging on that thing. It's like, it's been all sorts of weird places. It's not with him, right? And they've said often he should be using his cane. He won't. So he's going to do the same shit my grandfather did. End up falling and breaking something, and then you're really SOL, right? And apparently he fell last week on something, over something. Like he just stood up and whoop, down he goes. It's like, he's not trying to do anything different, so that's the stuff that he's inviting in. Right? I'm not going into their chaos, so I wasn't home when that whole situation happened. But yeah, just like the health shit, like they all started going downhill more when I started setting boundaries. And then it's like, oh, so you mean my family is literally like a thing that's been burdening me to the point where I can't dream for myself and I can't want things for myself because they've taught me that it's selfish. But in reality, all I wanted was my own life, and I'm a very family-oriented person. So if I would have been allowed to have my own life, and if it was okay and I was actually encouraged to do things because I wanted to and because I wanted to find ways to express myself, I wouldn't be looking at writing them off completely now, right? But I wasn't allowed to have those things. I was taught that I existed solely to give my entire life over to the family and their toxicity, and they were just supposed to suck the life out of me. So when I started setting boundaries, then I started realizing all the ways that wasn't working. And they started feeling all the ways that it wasn't working, but not necessarily understanding what wasn't working about it yet. So there's little things that come up every now and then. It's just like, ooh, this is like a whole weird ass thing, but then talking to my brother about it, and then he started figuring it out, and it's like, okay, now I'm getting my life purpose and why I'm here to piss people off and to not just conform. And the one thing on the pattern app talks about how you might find that really weird things do happen if you do try to conform. It's like, well, that makes sense. Like, everything seemed to go wrong when I was trying to conform because I'm not meant to. Okay. Yeah, hour and 50 minutes. Again, longer than I was planning on going, and now I'm hungry, and it's like 2 o'clock. I haven't eaten breakfast or anything today, so I'm kind of hungry. As always, I appreciate you. Until the next time, see ya.